The wind along the western cliffs of Ireland howls like a voice that has forgotten its name. Through fog and peat smoke, a black steed appears, not galloping, but gliding, hooves never touching soil. Upon its back rides a figure without a head, cradling its own face like a lantern, its eyes aglow with hellish light. Where it rides, silence falls. No dogs bark, no birds stir, and every gate swings open, as if death were an honored guest. They call him the Dullahan, but before he was a name muttered in fear, before he was tamed by Gothic fiction and hollowed into Halloween costume. The Dullahan was something older, something sacred, a revenant born not of fear, but of memory, and of the ancient Celtic bond between land, blood, and the Vale beyond. In the ancient tongue, his name means dark man. But this darkness is not merely the absence of light. It is the shadow, cast by knowledge no longer spoken aloud. He is not a villain. He is not a ghost. He is a messenger. The earliest whispers of the Dullahan trail back to the Tuatha De Danann, the luminous race of gods and heroes said to have ruled Ireland before the coming of men. These beings, half forgotten and half remembered, were said to withdraw into the Side, the hollow hills, when the age of myth waned. But not all who dwelled in the hills were content to be forgotten. Among the Daoine Maithe, the good folk, the Fae, the Dullahan was different. He was not bound to the harvest festivals or the moon's cycle. He rode alone, under no banner but his own, carrying no weapon but his whip of human spine, and no cargo but fate. His black coach, the Cuaiste Bodhar, was drawn by 6 spectral horses, whose hooves struck sparks without flame, and whose breath was mist and frost. To see the coach was to know someone would die, but to see the rider, to lock eyes with the glowing severed head, was to be marked. In some versions of the tale, the Dullahan speaks a name. In others, he merely stops at the threshold, and the candle within his skull flickers once. Either way, the result is the same. The person named or signaled or merely imagined dies within the day. Yet for all the terror he inspires, the Dullahan is not chaotic. He is precise. His role is ritual. He does not kill at random, nor linger in uncertainty. His presence is final, a punctuation mark at the end of a life already chosen by forces older than time. There is no bargaining, no delay, no escape. And herein lies the first paradox. For a figure born of such grim inevitability, the Dullahan has proven astonishingly mutable. His myth has changed, fractured, recombined over the centuries, moving from oral tale to medieval manuscript, from peasant vision to poetic metaphor. In some counties, he rides a skeleton horse. In others, a solid black beast with steaming flanks. Sometimes he bears his own head under one arm. Sometimes he holds it aloft like a lantern, its skin stretched tight as parchment, its teeth grinning wide enough to crack. Always, though, he rides alone. This solitude is not punishment. It is purpose. The Dullahan rides not as executioner, but as ferryman. Not across rivers, but across thresholds. From breath into silence, from presence into memory. Why then does his story persist? Why does this figure, faceless yet so vividly imagined, continue to ride the edges of our dreams and our dread? Because the Dullahan is not merely a myth. He is a memory shaped like a man, a ritual embodied, a prophecy that repeats with every breath held on a moonless night. Long before fear was entertainment, it was instruction. And the Dullahan did not frighten for pleasure. He frightened to prepare. In old Ireland, death was not a stranger. It was a neighbor, always near. Famine, sickness, and war visited often and unannounced. The line between life and death was thin, and the people knew it. They lived with one foot in the world and one in the other world. And so they told stories not to escape death, but to understand it. The Dullahan was one such understanding, a shape to hold the shapeless moment when the spirit leaves the body. He came not from wickedness, but from necessity. A culture that refused to look away from mortality gave it form, gave it ritual, gave it the Dullahan. He was never evil. He was never good. He simply was. And in this ambiguity lies his power. Unlike devils who are punished or saints who are praised, the Dullahan answers to no moral compass. He cannot be bribed with prayers or banished with blessings. Holy ground does not repel him. He is, in this sense, unholy, not because he is cursed, but because he stands outside the sacred order. In stories told along the western counties, Mayo, Sligo, Galway, old women still recall warnings whispered by grandmothers long gone. Don't look if you hear the coach. Don't speak if he passes. If you must look, smear your face with blood or mud. He only sees the clean. These were not superstitions. They were survival tactics. For those who saw the Dullahan and lived were said to be changed forever, dream-haunted, touched by frost, drawn to silence. But there is another story, stranger still. It is said that if the Dullahan is forced to speak, truly speak, the world trembles. For his voice is not a sound, but a force. It is a crack in the order of things. His words are not made of breath and tongue, but of command. It is for this reason, some say, that he keeps his head severed, so that his full voice may never be uttered. Those who believed this took great pains to avoid his gaze. Others went further still. They believed that iron, particularly forged iron, touched by human hands, could repel him. Blacksmiths then were not only craftsmen, but guardians. A nail in the lintel, a horseshoe over the door, a shard in the hearth. These were not decorations. They were lines drawn against the tide. Still, the Dullahan returned. He always returns. And though his legend bent and blurred through centuries, certain symbols held fast. The black coach, drawn by 6 headless horses, the whip, made of human spine, the head, luminous, grinning, and all-seeing. Some said it could see for miles in every direction. Some said it glowed, not with fire, but with rot, that the light inside was not warmth, but knowledge, the knowing of the exact hour, place, and manner of your death. No one could outrun him. But in rare tales, one could delay him. If a person threw gold onto the road, a coin, a ring, a brooch, the Dullahan would halt. Not for greed, but out of disdain. He loathed gold, they said, not because of what it was, but because of what it meant. Wealth, vanity, distraction. In the presence of such symbols, he vanished like smoke. This strange repulsion hints at an ancient logic. The Dullahan does not tolerate illusion. He is drawn only to truth, brutal, final, inescapable truth. And yet, in a land bound by ritual and rhythm, even death must move according to its own mysterious order. The Dullahan is not chaos incarnate. He is precision wrapped in myth. His presence does not rupture the world, it completes it. Like the tolling of a bell, his arrival marks the end of one rhythm and the beginning of silence. But silence, too, is a sound. In the quiet that follows the black coach, something lingers. Not dread exactly. Something heavier. A solemnity. A hush that feels almost reverent. It's as if the land itself recognizes the Dullahan, as if it remembers him not as a threat, but as an inevitability. Some of the oldest stories place him not on roads or paths, but at crossroads, the spaces between spaces. This detail matters. In Celtic belief, the crossroads is a liminal place, where boundaries dissolve and decisions cannot be unmade. To encounter the Dullahan, there was to confront fate without disguise. No turning left or right could alter the path once his wheels touched the soil. It is here that we find a clue. Because while the Dullahan is always shown in motion, riding, passing, arriving, his function is not to chase, but to meet. He comes not from behind, but ahead. He is not a hunter. He is an appointment. And so his story must be traced not only through fear, but through time. In the early Christian period, the Church sought to name and categorize every force of nature, every spirit, every local god. Many were canonized, others demonized. But the Dullahan resisted this taxonomy. He fit no doctrine. He carried no message of salvation, nor did he tempt with sin. He simply rode. Clerics called him pagan, but the people still left offerings on their doorsteps. In certain parishes, his figure was even incorporated into the liturgy, not officially, but in whispered prayers. Protect us from the one who names. Shield us from the Headless One. It was not out of superstition, but memory. Deep memory, the kind that persists even after its origin has crumbled. And here lies the second paradox. For though the Dullahan is said to ride alone, his presence implies a system, a world in which even death has ritual, even darkness has a face, and even endings have form. But who created that system? And why did they give it such a terrifying shape? Scholars have suggested that the Dullahan may have descended from the ancient Celtic war gods, particularly Crom Dubh or Crom Cruach, deities once worshipped with sacrifice. These gods were feared, but not hated. They were appeased, honored. In their presence, life and death were part of a sacred circle. When the old gods were banished or rebranded, their forms scattered like coals into the stories of common people. Some became saints, others became monsters. The Dullahan may be one such ember, a divine presence reduced to a figure of fear, but still burning with old power. And what power he holds. He rides not only through fields and bogs, but through centuries, reappearing wherever the veil thins. Some say he was seen during the Great Famine, his coach rolling silently past rows of withered corpses. Others claim he appeared during wars at the edges of shattered villages. He does not change with the times. He marks them. He is not a ghost from the past. He is the shadow cast by every ending. But what if he is not merely the shadow, but the reflection of something far more ancient, more concealed? The Dullahan's image may seem singular, but in truth, it is a prism. When you peer into the dark of his myth, it splits into many colors, each pointing to a different truth, a different origin, a different shape of fear. For centuries, we have mistaken the Dullahan for a singular entity. But across the Celtic world, headless figures appear like echoes in stone and ink. In Scottish lore, the Sanless Uan, the headless lamb, foretold the deaths of children. In Breton tales, the Anko drives a cart of bones and wears no face. Even in Welsh traditions, certain ghosts cry not in sorrow, but in silence, for they lack the mouths to speak. Could the Dullahan be not a name, but a mask worn by something deeper? Consider this. In Irish lore, the head is the seat of power, wisdom, and spiritual force. To lose it is not merely to die, but to be unmoored from identity. And yet, the Dullahan, headless, holds his own head in his hand, as if defying that rule. He carries his essence like a relic, refusing to let it be buried. He is dismembered, but not diminished, separated, but not severed. This defiance of natural order is not a sign of chaos, but of meaning. It invites a different reading of the myth, one not rooted in horror but in transformation. Perhaps the Dullahan is not a bringer of death, but a threshold spirit, one who oversees not the end of life, but the passage from one state of being to another. His headless form is not a grotesque, but a symbol of transition, from body to soul, from self to spirit, from memory to myth. If we accept this, then everything changes. The whip of spine is not a weapon. It is a symbol of lineage, of ancestry, of the unbroken thread of bone that links one generation to the next. The black coach is not a hearse. It is a vessel between worlds. And the Dullahan's lantern head is not a warning. It is a guide. In this light, the stories take on a new tone. What once seemed like terror becomes awe. What was once dread becomes reverence. The Dullahan does not come to punish. He comes to accompany. He does not slay. He escorts. He does not seek souls. He acknowledges them. It is only through the distortion of time and the fear born of forgetting that his image became monstrous. And so, we arrive at the story's first contradiction. The Dullahan is a creature feared for his silence, and yet he is a messenger. He is seen as a herald of death, but may in fact be the guardian of the soul's journey. His whip of spine may once have marked not damnation, but inheritance, a reminder that every ending feeds the roots of something new. This is the point where myth bends. It is here that the Dullahan ceases to be a character and becomes an idea, a force that flows beneath the surface of time, shifting shape, wearing new masks, always reminding us of the truth we try hardest to forget, that life is never still, that all things ride toward change, and perhaps that is why his head sees so far. It does not watch the present. It gazes into what lies beyond the bend in the road. To see as the Dullahan sees, that is the question the myth quietly asks. What would it mean to view the world from beyond life? To hold your own head like a lantern and shine it backward through time? The eyes of the living are bound by memory, by illusion, by hope. But the Dullahan's eyes, severed from flesh, are said to pierce veils. They do not blink. They do not look away. This power, to witness what others cannot, has always belonged to certain figures in myth. Oracles, prophets, madmen. But the Dullahan does not speak prophecy. He does not warn. He only appears, and in that appearance everything is said. A presence without explanation, a silence louder than thunder. It is no accident that in stories from the western counties, those who see the Dullahan and live often return changed. They speak in riddles. They lose the taste for company. They wander at dusk and listen for wheels on gravel. What they glimpsed was not just death. It was a truth too large to carry. The Dullahan's severed head becomes, in this reading, a symbol of inner sight, the kind of perception that comes only through loss. He rides not just to mark death, but to embody what it means to be unmoored from the illusions of ordinary life. That is why he carries his own head. He does not forget. He remembers too much, and the world remembers him even when it tries to forget. We see it in art, fragments of headless figures carved into ancient stones, stitched into marginalia of medieval manuscripts, lurking in folk tales half told beside hearth fires. The Dullahan never had a single origin point. He rode from many places, shaped by winds and tongues, shifting as he went. In this way, he mirrors the very concept of death, always the same yet always different. always feared, yet always familiar. And just as the Dullahan has changed through time, so too has his purpose. In some eras he was a warning, in others a protector. In times of plague, famine, or war, he was seen not as a curse, but as a guide, a being who ensured that no soul wandered too far, that the dead were properly received. One curious tale from County Clare speaks of a Dullahan who stopped before a cottage where a child lay dying. The mother, desperate, threw a gold ring at his feet. He dismounted, picked up the ring, and vanished. The child lived. But every year after, on that same night, the mother claimed to hear hooves at the gate and see 2 lanterns flickering beyond the hedge, not just one, as if the Dullahan had been split or multiplied, as if the delay came with a cost. This tale is not about victory over death. It is about the balance that must be kept. Delay too long and the weight shifts. Hold back fate, and something else must take its place. The Dullahan does not punish, but he does restore equilibrium. That is his true function. Not terror, not torment, but restoration. And once we understand that, the fear dissolves into something stranger. Reverence, perhaps, or awe. Because in the end, the Dullahan does not hunt the living. He gathers the ready. He rides not to seize. He rides to return what belongs to the dark. And the dark is not a void, but a presence, ancient, patient, and full of memory. In Celtic thought, night was not merely absence. It was a womb, a place of beginnings and returns. The Dullahan does not serve death as an end, but as a return to that which is oldest, the soil, the silence, the breath before birth. He is a figure carved from thresholds. Every element of his being hints at this. He is headless, yet he sees. He is feared, yet he brings peace. He is solitary, yet connected to a vast, unseen order. His contradictions are not flaws. They are signs that he belongs to another logic. A dream logic, ancient and circular, not bound by the sharp lines of waking thought. In psychological terms, we might call him a psychopomp, a guide of souls, like Hermes or Anubis. But where those figures are often merciful or radiant, the Dullahan remains severe, masked in horror, wrapped in ambiguity. He does not comfort. He confronts. He is not the hand that soothes the dying. He is the silence that follows the last heartbeat. And perhaps this is what we fear most, not death itself, but its impersonality. The Dullahan does not weep. He does not explain. He does not pause to listen. And yet, by embodying that terrible impartiality, he offers something profound. A glimpse into the impersonal majesty of nature itself. Just as the tides rise and fall, just as the moon wanes and returns, so too do we pass into darkness. The Dullahan does not create that pattern. He reveals it. And in this revealing he becomes something else, not just a creature, but a mirror. For every person who sees him must face not only the end, but themselves. This is why, in older versions of the tale, the Dullahan's head glows from within. It is not a lantern of fire, but of truth. Its light is not meant to guide the road ahead, but to shine inward, illuminating the soul in its final hour. What do we see in that light? Not the Dullahan's judgment, but our own. This truth unsettles, even in modern times. We pretend that death is a failure, something that happens only when something goes wrong. But the Dullahan reminds us it is not a mistake. It is a promise, a return. He rides not because something has gone awry, but because something must now be completed. In this way, he functions like a ritual blade, cutting the final thread with neither malice nor mercy. He is the sacred executor of endings, unburdened by emotion, unchanged by plea. That is why he does not speak. To speak would mean to explain, and endings do not explain themselves. They simply arrive. And yet, the Dullahan's silence is not empty. It is full of what cannot be said. In ancient ritual practice, silence was often a form of reverence. The unsaid carried more power than the spoken. The Dullahan's silence, then, is not the absence of meaning. It is the containment of it. A silence so full, it presses against the edges of the world. And when he rides, that silence rides with him, through hedge and gate, over hill and hearth, until the breath stops and the wheel turns again. Because what he brings is not chaos, but closure. He is not the destroyer. He is the finisher. But even a finisher has origins. And if the Dullahan is the embodiment of completion, then somewhere behind him lies a beginning, one veiled, fragmented, and submerged in the pre-Christian soil of myth. For while we now speak of him as a figure of fear, older echoes suggest he once carried a sacred role, not an omen of doom, but a guardian of passage. To trace his earliest footsteps, we must turn not to the written page, but to the carved stone. Ogham inscriptions, Bronze Age burial sites, and megalithic mounds whisper of rituals long lost. Rituals in which the severing of the head was not an act of cruelty, but of power. The head, in Celtic spirituality, was more than a body part. It was a vessel, a home for the soul, a totem of divine force. Among the ancient Celts, warriors would decapitate enemies not in savagery, but in reverence. Skulls were kept not as trophies, but as relics. They were set into walls, buried beneath thresholds, hung above sacred wells. To take a head was to claim the life force it once carried, and to carry one's own, as the Dullahan does, was to walk as a bridge between the worlds. His head, then, is not just a grotesque image. It is a remnant of a lost cosmology, a symbol that once meant power, now seen only through the lens of horror. This loss of context has transformed the Dullahan from a psycho-spiritual guide into a monster. But if we listen closely to the older stories, the ones passed from grandmother to child in smoke-filled cottages, we find traces of reverence still lingering beneath the fear. In one such tale told near Loughgoor, a woman claims to have seen the Dullahan stop beside a dying oak. He dismounted, touched the tree with his whip of spine, and whispered a name. The tree, already hollow, cracked and fell. The next morning, an old man from the village was found peacefully dead, a smile on his face. The people did not wail. They nodded. They left bread by the roots of the fallen oak. This is not a tale of terror. It is a tale of exchange. The Dullahan's role in such stories is not to take without balance, but to keep the cycle intact. Death is not theft. It is trade. The end of one life feeds the ground from which another will grow. But this sacred view did not survive the coming of empire. With the arrival of foreign doctrines that feared death, punished the body, and promised salvation only in the beyond, the Dullahan became suspect. His silence was no longer reverent, but unholy. His whip, no longer a symbol of lineage, became a tool of torture. His glowing head, once a beacon, was twisted into a sign of corruption. And yet he endured. Because symbols as old as him do not vanish. They adapt. They wear new masks. They survive beneath the floorboards of official belief, in the lullabies of the poor, in the dreams of those who sleep close to the ground. The Dullahan became a ghost, not because he died, but because the world forgot what he meant. He lingers, not as a memory, but as a question. What have we lost when we lose our old ways of dying? And what truths might return if we dared to remember? We lost the rituals that once gave shape to grief. We lost the stories that softened the sharpness of absence. And in their place we planted silence, not the sacred kind, but the kind that forgets. The Dullahan, like so many mythic figures, now roams a world that has forgotten why it once needed him. But something curious is happening. Even in the age of reason, the Headless Rider returns. He rides not only in Irish folk tales, but in literature, cinema, dreams. His shape mutates, sometimes a soldier, sometimes a horseman, sometimes a faceless figure in the woods, but the essence remains. He has become a universal archetype, the deathbringer who carries his own awareness, the end that knows itself. And it is here, in this archetypal form, that the Dullahan begins to speak again, not in words, but in echoes. He whispers to the unconscious mind, to the dreamer walking forest paths, to the mourner staring into firelight. He rides through our collective psyche, not as a relic of the past, but as a guide through modern darkness. In a culture obsessed with youth, speed, and permanence, the Dullahan is a confrontation, a reminder that all things end, that endings have meaning, and that meaning lives in how we face them. The head he carries glows with the light of forgotten wisdom. Carl Jung once wrote that symbols arise spontaneously from the deep, as if the psyche itself remembers what the mind forgets. In this view, the Dullahan is not folklore. He is a living symbol, still pulsing with relevance. He does not haunt the roads of Ireland alone. He haunts the threshold of every soul who has ever asked, what comes next? His story becomes more than a myth. It becomes a mirror. In that mirror, we do not see the grotesque. We see ourselves, fragile, luminous, afraid, and beautiful in our finitude. The Dullahan rides not to end us, but to hold us in that final moment of clarity, when all masks drop and only truth remains. In this reading, even his whip takes on new meaning. A spine is the central pillar of the body, the structure that holds us upright. In the Dullahan's hand, it becomes a symbol of the path each of us must walk alone. Not a weapon, but a line, drawn between life and afterlife. Each vertebra a step, each lash a reminder. He does not whip to wound, but to awaken. And what of his coach? The Quaistebotar, the death coach that moves without sound. It is not merely transport, it is ceremony. Each wheel turns like the cycle of the year: birth, growth, decay, return. The coach does not rush. It glides. It does not swerve. It arrives. And it is drawn by horses without heads, without eyes. Beings that do not need to see the road, for they have always known the way. We often ask what the Dullahan wants. But the better question is, what does he carry? Not corpses, not curses, but the weight of endings untold. He rides to restore that which modern life has stripped from death. Its depth, its dignity, its place in the sacred pattern. He carries the truth we buried. He carries the questions we silenced. And in his gaze, radiant, unwavering, he dares us to look back. But what if those questions were never meant to be silenced at all? What if the Dullahan does not ride toward us, but rises from within us, summoned not by fate, but by forgetting? The myth that once protected us from oblivion now wanders untethered, its meaning fragmented, its voice dimmed. Yet still, it rides, because it must. There is a story, rarely told, half lost to bog and breath, of a village where the Dullahan came not once, but every year on the same moonless night. The people did not flee. They prepared. They lit fires at crossroads. They set out bowls of blackberries and sang low songs to the wind. When the coach passed, no one died. But always, something changed. A child awakened, screaming. A horse would not drink. A mirror cracked in silence. And the next morning, the fields bore strange blossoms never seen before. This story was once told not in fear, but in reverence. Because those villagers understood something we have forgotten. That death is not only the end of the body, but the transformation of the world around it. The Dullahan does not only close doors, he opens unseen ones. He brings not just the final breath, but the turning of the wheel. This is the second great twist in his myth. He is not the figure who ends the story. He is the one who insists it continue, but in a new form. The coach rolls not into stillness, but into change. The whip cracks, not to punish, but to wake. The glowing head does not blind. It reveals. And what it reveals is this: we are afraid not of death, but of the mystery it hides. Modern thought has tried to exile mystery. We want clean lines, clinical terms, a chart to mark the end. But mystery is the soil of myth. And without it, the Dullahan cannot speak. He does not thrive in data. He rides through dream. He drinks the waters of liminality. That is why he still appears. That, even now in dreams and waking fragments, a rider glimpsed in fog, a soundless wheel in the night, a sudden knowing that someone, somewhere, has gone. The Dullahan does not need belief to exist. He needs only silence, not absence, sacred silence, the kind that listens. There are those who say they've seen him not as a terror, but as a guide, a presence at the edge of the bed in the last moments of breath, watching with a light that does not burn. They speak of a peace that followed, a hush that felt like the closing of a book, long read, deeply loved. Perhaps the Dullahan, in his truest form, is not the end we fear, but the end we need, a final gesture that restores shape to the shapeless, that takes the chaos of grief and folds it into ritual. Without him, death becomes a fall. With him, it becomes a crossing. And what lies beyond, he does not say. That is the final paradox. For all his vision, all his knowing, the Dullahan never reveals what follows. His head may glow with insight, but it casts no light past the threshold. He rides up to the edge and then vanishes. Because some truths are not meant to be told. They are meant to be met. And so, the Dullahan waits, not with hands outstretched, but with presence alone. He does not pursue. He does not persuade. He simply arrives at the appointed hour, like a bell that rings only once, heard only by the one it calls. In that instant, there is no more time. There is only meeting, not with a monster, but with meaning. This is what separates myth from fiction. A monster can be defeated, escaped, explained, but meaning cannot be outrun. The Dullahan is not here to chase the living. He is here to bear witness when the veil lifts. His coach may be silent, but his presence is thunder. There are ancient tales, older than ink, remembered in bone, where the Dullahan appears, not just to humans, but to the land itself. In one, a withered oak forest is said to have bloomed after his passing. In another, a stream that had run dry for years suddenly overflowed when his wheel touched its edge. Death here does not despoil. It renews. These are not fairy stories. They are mythic instructions, teachings buried in the language of symbol. The Dullahan teaches through reversal. He comes headless, yet sees all. He is feared, yet brings release. His whip is made of what once held life upright. His coach moves forward, yet it marks a return. The ritual is complete only when we understand. Nothing is what it seems. And perhaps that's the most haunting truth of all. not that death is coming, but that it wears a face we've known all along. In dreams, children draw the Dullahan without knowing his name. In nightmares, people wake breathless after hearing hooves they swear were real. Some say he leaves traces, a cracked mirror, a burned-out candle, a whisper in a room with no air. But what if these are not hauntings? What if they are reminders? The Dullahan does not exist to terrify. He exists to recall, to stir something ancient in us, a memory that predates language, a knowing carried in the blood, that once, long ago, death was not a vanishing, but a journey. And those who took that journey were not alone. He rides not just at night, but through the corridors of time, showing up wherever endings go unmarked, wherever grief has no shape, wherever silence is feared instead of revered. In a modern world of constant noise, his arrival is the one silence that still demands listening. And we must listen, because he is more than a myth. He is a reckoning. He reminds us that our fear of death is not just fear of absence, it is fear of transformation. What will we become when we are no longer who we were? The Dullahan has no mouth to answer, no breath to soothe. But in his presence, that question ceases to be frightening. It simply becomes necessary. This is his role now, not to end life, but to end our illusions about it, to peel back the veil of denial and show us the form beneath, luminous, severed and whole. And in that final moment, when his wheel halts and the head turns toward us with its glowing gaze, something within us stirs, not fear, but a strange calm, as if some deeper part remembers what the surface always forgot, that endings are not erasures, they are unveilings. And what is unveiled in the end is not the Dullahan, but ourselves. For all the dread he inspires, he holds no sword, speaks no curse. He carries only what we give him, our fear, our forgetting, our refusal to look. In this way, he becomes not a bringer of death, but a reflection of how we live in its shadow. The Dullahan does not decide who dies. He arrives after the choice has been made, by fate, by age, by accident, by consequence. What he brings is not doom, but recognition, the final recognition. And in that moment, something ancient stirs. The soul, the self beyond self, awakening to its long-awaited transition. In older times, there were guides for this crossing, midwives of death, who sat at the bedside and sang the soul through its unraveling. The Dullahan is their memory cast in myth, a grand figure who replaces the soft with the stark, but keeps the function the same. He escorts, he watches, he rides beside, and perhaps that is why he does not speak, because the words needed at that threshold are not spoken aloud. They are known. This is why those who have seen him, truly seen him, in the flicker between breath and silence, often report not terror, but stillness, a sense that the universe has paused, taken a breath, bowed its head. The Dullahan's silence is not void. It is ritual, a hush that honors what is leaving and what is left behind. Because though he marks departure, he leaves traces, in the scorched line where his wheels passed, in the whisper of hooves across stone, in the uncanny bloom of a flower that should not grow in winter. These are not tricks or hauntings. They are residues of transformation, signs that something crossed from one side of the veil to the other, and that the veil, for a moment, thinned. Some say he is drawn to those who carry unspoken burdens, the ones who walk the line between worlds without knowing it. Artists, dreamers, the grieving, those who live too close to silence. He rides to them not with malice, but with mirror, and in his glow they see what they've carried, what they've clung to, what they must now release. In this sense, the Dullahan becomes more than myth. He becomes myth enacted, not just a tale to be told, but a force to be encountered. Not in the graveyard, but in the moment. We surrender the need to control the ending. When we accept that some questions do not want answers, they want reverence. That is what he teaches in the end. Not about death, but about reverence. About seeing life not as a line, but as a circle, sacred, shadowed, and always turning. His whip, his head, his coach, all symbols now, not of horror, but of rhythm. The rhythm of going, of becoming, of returning to the soil and the story at once. For nothing in myth survives unless it serves. And what the Dullahan serves is not fear, but memory. He is the one who keeps the threshold intact, the one who watches over the shape of the end, and ensures that it is not an abyss, but a passage. But thresholds are dangerous places, neither here nor there, neither living nor gone. To linger too long in that liminal space is to invite unraveling. That is why the Dullahan does not wait. He rides. He moves with purpose, not haste. His path is always forward, yet it circles back through memory, myth, and marrow. For the threshold is not just where death resides, it is where transformation begins. In this sense, the Dullahan shares kinship with other figures of twilight. The ferryman Charon, the Norse Valkyries, the Egyptian jackal-headed Anubis. But while they offer passage, the Dullahan offers confrontation. He does not shield us from death's face. He holds it in his hand. He makes us look. And in that gaze, something changes. It is not that we stop fearing death. It is that we begin to understand what that fear conceals. The grief of impermanence, the ache of separation, the yearning to hold what cannot be held. The Dullahan does not take these things from us. He makes them visible. He rides through our longing and leaves it bare. There is an old tale from Donegal, spoken in low tones by peat fires, of a woman who followed the Dullahan's coach, barefoot and alone. She had lost a child and sought no comfort, only answers. For 3 nights she wandered behind the soundless wheels, never sleeping. On the 4th, she vanished. But from that day forward, her cottage glowed at night, faint as breath, and her garden never wilted again. Some say she crossed with him, others say she became part of him. For the Dullahan is not fixed. He is a composite, made of countless endings, layered with countless griefs, woven from stories both remembered and lost. He is not one being, but all our ancestors riding together, each holding their own deathlight, each bearing witness to what must be carried across. This is why he needs no voice. He speaks through presence, through archetype, through the trembling silence that precedes change. And in his silence is the wisdom we rarely dare name, that to die is to be gathered. Not erased, not discarded, gathered, recollected, returned to the source from which all stories emerge. His whip of spine reminds us, even the structure that held us upright becomes part of the offering. His head, luminous, seeing, reminds us, even in death there is knowing. His coach, black, quiet, inevitable, reminds us, the journey is sacred, no matter where it leads. But perhaps the most haunting part of the Dullahan is not his figure, but his consistency. He does not fail, he does not falter, he does not forget. He comes when the cycle demands. And in a world where so much is unpredictable, he is certainty, wrapped in shadow, yes, but also in rhythm. He is the breath that ends the song and signals silence. And maybe that's why we dream of him, not to frighten, but to remember that we are not the first to walk into darkness, that we will not walk alone, and that someone somewhere beyond the veil still rides to meet us. Someone somewhere beyond the veil still rides to meet us. And so we come to understand that the Dullahan is not a figure of isolation, but of reunion. In every echo of his wheels, there is the pulse of return, not to the world we left, but to the mystery that birthed us. He rides not only for the dying, but for the forgotten, for the cast-out truths, for the silence we buried beneath noise. He is the final storyteller. But his tale is not one of fear. It is a song sung backward, one that begins at the end and ends where it all began. This is why his presence lingers long after the coach has passed, why the wind still bends through hedgerows in patterns no one can trace, why the animals hush when fog thickens just before dawn. Somewhere, in the hollows of the land, in the bones of ancient hills, the Dullahan's tale still whispers. Not all is lost. There are places he passes through that never forget. A stone circle overgrown with moss, a crossroads marked only by birdsong, an unmarked grave that blooms out of season. In these thin places, where the veil is weaker, people have reported strange things, not terrors, but recognitions. A sense of being seen, a weight lifted, a scent of soil and something older. Because the Dullahan does not only guide the dead, he reminds the living. He reminds us that death is not the opposite of life, but part of it, folded inside like a seed, waiting for its moment to open. In many ancient cultures, death was not discussed in whispers. It was sung into the walls, carved into the hearths, woven into every rite of passage. It was not an interruption. It was a return. The Dullahan is what happens when that memory refuses to die, when the old world insists on being known, when the dead demand their place in the story again. In one haunting folk fragment, there's mention of a black horse with no rider, standing at the mouth of a cave during Samhain. The villagers knew better than to approach, but one boy, brave or foolish, touched its reins. He saw visions, not of fire or torment, but of his own ancestors, reaching out with smiles that held no teeth, only light. When he came back, his hair had turned white, and he never spoke again. But he played the harp like no one else ever had. What had he touched? What had touched him? These are not answers meant for words. They are the kind that hum beneath the skin, the kind the Dullahan carries in his head of light, too bright for daylight, too true for logic. He is not an end. He is an echo made flesh. The vibration that continues after the bell has stopped ringing. And when his story is finally heard, not as a fright, but as a thread, we begin to see him not as a stranger, but as kin. We too are carriers of ending. We too move through cycles. We too hold within us a head that sees the truth, even if we've not yet learned to look. Because to meet the Dullahan is to remember the map we forgot, and to remember it is to walk home again. But what if the map was never ours to begin with? What if the path the Dullahan rides is not meant to be followed but felt, not drawn in lines but pulsing in the marrow, in dreams, in the hush between thoughts? This is the final paradox. We search for him in the outer world, but he was never outside us. He is not a ghost. He is a return. All along, the Dullahan has not been coming for us. He has been coming from us, from the buried truths, the unspoken farewells, the unwept sorrows we carry like stones in the pockets of the soul. His silence is our own silence, deepened and made visible. This changes everything. For centuries, we believed the Dullahan to be a harbinger of death. But what if he is something stranger? The very embodiment of how we refuse to die fully. of how something in us lingers, resists release, begs for ritual. His presence then is not a curse. It is a calling to die well, to cross with the shape of the soul intact. Modernity has sterilized this passage. It locks death behind doors, masks it with euphemism, silences the wailing that once accompanied the soul's release. But myth remembers. Myth demands the scream, the song, the shroud, the stone. The Dullahan rides to restore that theater, to make the invisible visible again. And yet, he does not do this through spectacle. He does it through stillness, through contradiction, through his refusal to be named, explained, or captured. The moment you try to hold him, he dissolves. The moment you face him, he shows you yourself. He is not here to end your life. He is here to end your illusion. And illusions are not gentle when they break. That is why the Dullahan appears with no warning. Why his whip cracks through the air like a rupture in meaning. Why the head he holds glows, not with fire, but with truth, too raw for daylight. He is not monstrous because he is cruel. He is monstrous because he is real. Because he shows what most cannot bear to see. That all endings are beginnings in disguise. And all monsters are mirrors if you dare to look long enough. There's a tale from Clare of a blind fiddler who played it awake. Mid-song, he froze. "He's here," he said, "but not for the dead." The room emptied. He stayed. When the mourners returned, the candles had gone out, but the fiddle still played, though no one touched it. The music was slow, endless, like a road that loops into itself. The Dullahan does not leave footprints. He leaves echoes, and in those echoes we feel something rise, a sense of presence, not absence. A recognition that death, when fully seen, does not erase meaning. It amplifies it. It clarifies. It re-enchants. And what once terrified us begins to resemble grace. This is the truth the Dullahan never speaks, but always brings. That death is not the end of the story. It is the moment the story becomes real. And when the story becomes real, it ceases to be story at all. It becomes experience, direct, visceral, eternal. This is where the Dullahan brings us. Not to death's doorstep, but to the end of fiction. To the place where no metaphor can shield us, and no denial can protect. He strips the tale of its distance and places it gently into our hands. In this way, he is not just the harbinger, he is the invitation. To witness what lies beneath endings. To accept the sacred unmaking that is the final right of life. All myths that endure carry a truth too big for facts. And the Dullahan, riding across fields, dreams, and generations, has endured because he carries a truth that no age can erase. That to live is to end, and to end is to return. He is the curve that connects the final dot back to the first. He rides in silence not because he has nothing to say, but because what he knows can only be felt. He has watched every age bury its dead, rename its fears, reframe its endings. But still he rides, still the wheels turn, still the glowing head lights the way into the dark. For those willing to look, he shows a path where nothing is truly lost, only reshaped. There is a grace in his terror, if you have the courage to meet it. Because the Dullahan does not come to frighten, he comes to remind that even in your last breath, you are not alone. Even in your final moment, the myth still walks with you. You are part of it. You are shaped by it. And when your time comes, you will not vanish. You will transform. In Irish tradition, the most sacred tales were not written. They were spoken, sung, carried in the mouth and the marrow. So too is the Dullahan, a story not to be read, but heard, told in the hush of twilight, In the hush between heartbeats, in the hush after the final word is said. This is how myths live, not on pages, but in presence. And when we let go of needing answers, when we surrender to the mystery, the Dullahan becomes less a figure of doom and more a keeper of rhythm. The rhythm of breath, of endings, of the soul's return to soil and sky. He marks not the fall, but the turning. Because the oldest myths are not about how we die, they are about how we remember. And the Dullahan, glowing and headless, endless and exact, is memory in motion, the final guardian of meaning. He does not block the path. He is the path. Thank you for walking the dark road with me, into myth, into mystery, into the liminal hush, where truth wears a skull for a crown. The Dullahan's tale is not one of endings, but of deep remembering. If you found something sacred in this silence, I invite you to stay close for the next story. Until then, ride gently and listen well.